Alright, so I have this steering wheel here. This is a pretty rare steering wheel off of a Crofton. This is Dennis's wheel. I know that because it says right here on that tag. You can see it's kind of like a Bakelite material, and it's got some cracks. It's missing a piece here, some cracks here, and we're going to restore this, and this video is going to show that process. So the first thing that we need to do is come in here and grind out all these cracks, and then we're going to use, I'm going to try this JB Weld steel stick. I'm not a Alright, so you can see I've ground out all the cracks with the grinder. There might be a few small ones I'm going to hit, but the next step is, this is real rough. I'm going to sand it down with some 180 just to get that roughness off of it. And I've also cleaned up the metal here. I'm going to go ahead and clean there and here, and then we're going to wipe it down good and apply the epoxy. Alright, so now that I got this all sanded smooth with some 180 grit, I'm trying to get all that old rough grime off of there. We're going to spray it down good with some grease and wax remover, and we're going to get all that sand and dust off of it. Okay, so I got everything cleaned up, sanded smooth. Looks like we're going to need about that much putty. So I'm going to go ahead and just cut that right about where I feel like we need it. So we're just going to knead this together and make like Play-Doh, modeling clay, and we're going to mold that out. Now I've went through and I've tapered all these edges to where the putty can be feathered out nice and even. So let's go ahead and do that now. Alright, so you want to get this kneaded up real good till it all turns like a dark gray color. And then I'm going to start by kind of making it in the shape that we need, and then I'm going to split it, and we're going to do most of our just general shape with this putty, but we'll use a filler that's a lot easier to sand shape afterwards. And you'd rather it be, it's okay for it to be a little high because you can always grind it down. A little low, we can always use a little filler or add more putty. But it looks like we're gonna have the general shape here pretty quickly. And then obviously we gotta let that set up. So that's what we're looking like here. Got a general shape going. Might be able to do a little bit better with it, but it looks like it's overbuilt to where we can shape it with the sander. All right, so while this is drying, I think I'm gonna go ahead and apply my first coat to where I've dug out all the hairline cracks and the areas that is chipped out where we need some filler. What I use is a product from U-Pole called 7061. It's a flexible high density filler. This is really good for anything that can flex or bend, and this rubber coated steel has a little bit of flex to it. If you use like Bondo or something like that, you're very likely to get more cracks. This is made for plastic bumpers, rubber fillers, things like that. Mainly works really well on plastics, and it works really good on wheels like this because since it gives a little bit, it tends to not crack as easy. But it's also super easy to sand. All right, so this is what this stuff looks like. It's just kind of like a dark brown. It's kind of thick, like a lot like Bondo body filler. That's probably about all we're gonna need. One little scoop there, and it just mixes with the little hardener here. So I usually just give it that's probably more than enough. It's kind of hard to see the color with this putty, so make sure you get it mixed really, really well. I'm just gonna come in with this and go over. Probably gonna take two applications to get all these filled, but we're gonna get on there and let it start hardening. Get them smooth as you can, because the higher you build it, the more sanding you're gonna have to do. All right, so our JB putty has hardened, and when it comes to shaping this, I mean, you can use all kinds of power tools, but for as little as we got to do, I like to use some 80 grit and do it all by hand. So pretty much all the sanding I do on this thing's going to be hand sanding. I get a better feel that way, a better shape, and we'll get it all down to that process. So you're just going to want to shape that JB. All right, so if you get everything filled and sanded right, it should end up looking a lot like this, where you can see where it's just filled in the cracks. You can't even feel that with your finger. Here's where we filled it with the JB putty and then skimmed it with the bumper filler. Now, I notice I have a couple little divots like here, and I got one right here, and I have one right here. So I'm gonna go ahead, and you see a little one right here. I'm gonna go ahead and mix up a little bit more putty, and we're gonna fill those in. I'm just gonna smear it on there with my finger, let it dry, sand it one more time, hit everything with 180 grit to smooth it out, and then we're gonna put some primer on there to see how close it looks before we primer the whole thing. Okay, so I got everything feathered in nicely, got all the pits filled, all the cracks. I've taped up the splines, and I mixed up some U-Pole high build primer, and we're gonna put that in the gun, and we're gonna shoot this with high build primer. That way we can sand it down smooth and get it ready for paint. So now that our filler primer is dry, we're gonna pretty much sand most of it back off to fill in the imperfections, and then we'll end up priming it one more time before we're ready for paint. Okay, so I've sanded down the filler primer all the way down to 320. It's filled in all the little minor imperfections, and I've used a little bit of glaze to fill in any pits that I seen that we missed, that the filler putty didn't get. And it's all been wiped down, and now I'm going to use a dark gray sealer, and we're going to seal it dark gray before we paint it black. All right, so the black sealer is dry on the wheel, and I scuffed it with a gray Scotch-Brite, and we've wiped it down with prep wipe. So mixing up this black urethane, it's a single stage, spray 2 to 3 wet coats. I'm just gonna use my little mini jet there, and I'm gonna dust the back of it. I'm gonna get it covered good, and then we're going to flip the wheel, and then I'll paint the whole thing 2 to 3 coats. I just want to make sure I cover the bottom side, since I don't really want to flip it or touch it whenever I'm spraying.